O Brasil possui mais de 100 milhões de ações judiciais, mais de 1 milhão de advogados, mais de 1.200 faculdades de direito. E esses números só aumentam. Nós, advogados, aprendemos a litigar, mas não a resolver problemas. Como resultado, o Índice de Confiança na Justiça, ICJ Brasil, produzido pela Fundação Getúlio Vargas, aponta que, para 81% dos entrevistados, o judiciário é lento, ou muito lento. A mesma quantidade de pessoas afirmam que o acesso à justiça é caro, ou muito caro. Desde 1970, Frank Sander, professor de Harvard, tem criticado a ideia de que o judiciário seria o único caminho para a solução de conflitos. Desenvolveu-se, então, o sistema multiportas, que avalia qual o melhor mecanismo para a solução de cada tipo de conflito. São métodos adequados de solução de conflitos, reconhecidos atualmente pela legislação brasileira, a conciliação, a mediação, a arbitragem, o dispute board, entre outros. Esses mecanismos são utilizados no mundo todo, pois são menos onerosos, oferecem menos riscos, são mais rápidos, protegem a confidencialidade, são mais eficientes. A CAMES te oferece todos esses mecanismos da maneira mais acessível possível. Temos um quadro de árbitros e mediadores altamente qualificados, rígidos padrões éticos, custos mais acessíveis, processo eletrônico, unidades em todo o Brasil e regulamentos modernos e atualizados. Venha conhecer a CAMES e ofereça alternativas aos seus clientes.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to this seminar hosted by CAMES School. From Lex Sacra to Lex Mercatoria, Sacrality and Secularism in Arbitration, I'm Evelyn Barreto, and in this afternoon, I will have the pleasure of serving as the mediation among my fellow alumni from Hague Academy of International Law. In this afternoon here in Brazil, in São Paulo, it's raining cats and dogs. And I would like to say that, as you know, here in Brazil, we divide the parenthood of the arbitral practice between the scholars of procedure law and the internationalist law. In my mind, as Emmanuel Gaillard said in his prestigious general course in The Hague, Arbitrator has no forum. And if they did, it would be the world. So I really and truly believe that the institution of arbitration are international from the outset. So I'll have the honor to have with us in this afternoon Paulo Bádue, Associate Professor at the Lancaster Law School in the UK. His research explored the intersections of law and religion, legal theory, and international law. He is also a member of the Italian Bar Association and independent arbitrator. We have with us Dafer Dridi, lecturer at the Faculty of Law and Political Sciences in the University of Tunis El Manar, where he teaches international contract law and alternative dispute resolution in the master's program in the international business law. He is also a member of the Tunisian Bar and is also the correspondent of the UNIDROIT, International Institute for the Unification of Private Law for Tunisia in the United Nations. And last but not the least, my dearest friend, José Nantala Freire. He has a lawyer with over 20 years of experience in advisory and litigation practice, holding a PhD and a master's degree in international law from the São Paulo University. He's the founding member of the USP BRICS Study Group, and he's currently a partner and the head of agribusiness in Martins Villac Lawyers Association. So please, Nantala, you can start.
Good afternoon for everyone from Brazil, of course, and for my friends abroad, good morning or good evening, okay? I hope that my presentation that does not lead you to good night and you start sleeping. So it's very nice to be here with friends, with spectacular professors, and most of all, people that I know for a long time, and who I share the most uh, uh, the most pleasant memories about many things we lived together. So, Evelyn, thank you for kindest words. And sometimes when I read my resume, I think I'm an authority, but I'm just a guy here. Okay, and I'll try to share with you some thoughts on this very interesting um, and this very interesting event that we are promoting here in Camis, from Lex Sacra to Lex Mercatoria, Sacrality and Secularism in Arbitration, a general theme that we all set together. So I hope you will enjoy the discussions, everybody, and thank you, my friends, for accepting our invitation and coming and joining us here this afternoon. What I want to share with you, I, I'll try to be very straight. I am not very capable of being too straight, but I'll try to do so. Um, I studied in my PhD research the good faith principle in international arbitration. And what I want to discuss this afternoon with you is the faith in good faith, the evolution of faith in the good faith principle, and how it evolved and how it affects arbitration nowadays, and how it affected arbitration in the ancient years, in the ancient times. Okay, so I don't know if I share it here, or I think you need to call Patricia to share the screen. Oh yeah, great. That's it. So uh, in the beginning, well, this picture here that I'm showing to you, it's a painting of Leonardo da Vinci, but it's a very we are not sure if this was really painted by him, but I chose Da Vinci because Da Vinci has this very interesting thing of being secular, of bringing secular and also divine aspects in his masterpieces. And this particular one uh, showcases a little bit of that. And as we are from Lex Sacra to Lex Mercatoria, and from religion to from the sacred to the secular, this kind of summarizes a little bit of what we are intending to discuss here. But what is interesting is that in the beginning, and if we look at the first document that we have in our historiographic notes about law and international law itself. One of the oldest documents that we have is the Mezzalin Treaty. The Mezzalin Treaty was actually more an arbitral award than a treaty that was it was awarded like 3,000 years before Christ, so more than 5,000 years ago. And when we read the translations, of course, or the translation attempts of this document, we understand sometimes the very beginning of the good faith principle, because good faith by that time was much more faith than practice, than best practices than fair dealing or anything that is related to good faith nowadays. It was something very related to how the gods themselves would defend or not defend his people if the agreement set or if the award rendered was, for any reason, unfulfilled by any of the parties. And in this particular document, Mazarin Treaty, both kingdoms that were there discussing supply of water discussion. They were discussing access to water in the Mesopotamian region. Mazarin, who was the arbitrator of the case and was chosen by the parties, he defined some penalties based on the force of the gods. So something that was not only the penalties that the gods would apply, but also the reliance that the people contracting there on the gods was a key issue in these discussions in ancient times. The same thing happened more than 1,000 years after in the Kadesh Treaty, celebrated between Egyptians and Hittites and Ramses' kingdom. Okay, where the translations that we have nowadays of this particular treaty use the same strategy. And the good thing about this particular treaty is that Ramses and the king of the Hittites, they celebrated this agreement. It was a peace agreement, okay, between the peoples. And if they declared that not only them, the rulers of both peoples, were participating of the agreement, but even more, the gods of both sides. And if one side, for any reason, disregarded the agreement and unfulfilled it for any reason, the gods of this particular people would not protect them from the gods of the other. So, as you see, the intentions of the parties were declared not only for the others, but for the gods, and the participation of the gods of the faith was very important, and actually a key for the signing and the fulfillment of the agreement. This particular Kadesh agreement was fulfilled until the end of the Hittite civilization, which was a little bit before Ramses' death. So it was a very efficient agreement because it was fulfilled. So this is to show, and even then in the Middle Age, the agreement set by the rulers in Europe, they were all related somehow to God. They were all related somehow to the intentions of the parties and the presentation of those intentions to God as a witness of the agreement. So the parties would have to comply with it. They didn't comply with the agreements, but they used this tool to render things to God and to present the agreements to God as a very common practice in the agreements in the Middle Age. And what happened is that in Rome, things were a little bit different. In Rome, it began like this. The concept of good faith is very related to bona fides and to the goddess Fides in Roman time. Okay, we all know about it. But the best thing is when the Romans understood that the principle of good faith was very useful when they started to deal more with other peoples, and who, especially the ones that they dominated, and how this principle, because it was a general one, and it relied much more in reliance and trust, it could be used in mostly any culture. So they tried to take this principle that was very related to a particular god, Fides, and they started in the Jus Gentium to use especially after the Carthago Wars, they started to use Jus Gentium as a tool to bring people together and to bring more easily complied agreements with other nations and other cultures. And they started, even the Romans, to separate faith from practical issues, practical uses. And this is very interesting because this is what happened afterwards. Let me just change. When we started to study what good faith means nowadays, okay, we can understand that the evolution of the good faith principle and the importance of good faith principle in international law. Okay, we can see how good faith principle is important for many of our most important treaties nowadays, and that good faith is not anymore a religious obligation or a religious founded obligation. It is a secular thing related much more to practices and to posture than actually religious background or reliance on God's acts. Okay, so and this is very important because it unites peoples, and it's well understood by many different cultures. And in my research, I try to define a standardized application of the good faith principle in international arbitration, as good faith is very important in some of the most important treaties that we have since the United Nations Charter, the Vienna Convention, along the treaties, which is the constitution of the treaties. Many scholars classify it that way. The CISG, the Article 7 of the. And what is important is that nowadays, even with some controversy of the usage of good faith and the application of good faith as an enemy of pacta sunt servanda, or of party autonomy, what is really standardized is that those principles, good faith and pacta sunt servanda, good faith and party autonomy, they must work together. Vienna Convention makes it clear in the Article 26 what is that good faith, well, that pacta sunt servanda must be practiced in good faith. So it's obviously something that tells us to work with those principles together, not to work with them as enemies or as separate things. They need to be understood as a part of a system. Okay. And what I really the same thing, of course, in the unilateral principles that my colleague Daffer will cover much more properly. The good faith is very important, is one of the key concepts in the unilateral principles, and it's there in the Article 1.7. And what is important is that the application of good faith in international arbitration, as I was able to understand after analyzing more than 100 arbitral awards, is that the application of good faith nowadays is concrete, is based mostly on practices and the ability of the arbitrator to define what was the common intention of the parties, not the intention of one of them, or the intention or a hidden intention of one of them. The best application of good faith in those awards that I was able to analyze, and these ones are the ones that I used, but I analyzed more than 227 awards issued by the ICC. What I saw is that good faith does not bring uncertainty to pacta sunt servanda. It acts as a glue. It acts as a powerful tool to clarifying things, and mostly to demonstrate the real intentions of the parties and how parties were acting during the relationship, during the interaction they had with each other during the business development. So this is the good faith that is very important for international law and for international arbitration. It's a concrete good faith, the good faith that is aligned with pacta sunt servanda, which is aligned with best practices and with the real intentions, the common intentions of the parties, not the intentions, the isolated intentions of each one. So I'm finishing here my presentation. I had to move along a little bit quicker because of time. So let's move along, Evelyn.
Oh, thank you very much, José. It was such a pleasure to hear you. And now I would like to pass the words from Professor Paulo Varguil and his insights about the public policy as secular higher law in the recognition and enforcement of foreign and arbitral awards. You have all the audience now, Paulo, please.
Thank you, Evelyn. José, if you can take down the slides, I'm going to put mine. That's good. Let's see if you can see them now. Okay, it's probably like this.
We can open for questions after, okay?
Yeah. Can you see the slides now, Evelyn? Fantastic. Thank you. Right. Once again, thank you, Evelyn, for the beautiful sharing so far. Thank you, José, for organizing this. And thank you, Daffer, for your continued friendship over the years. My presentation builds upon what Evelyn said about Gaillard's position on the lack of forum for international arbitration. And it's part of a broader project on commercial arbitration in Europe. We're looking at, with some colleagues, at the psychological and anthropological roots of arbitration worldwide. And this part of the project is the one on public policy, to be seen as a secular higher law in the recognition and enforcement of foreign arbitral awards. So I'm going to spend a bit on the genealogy I'm not going to repeat what was just said by José on the Roman and canonic roots of arbitration. I'm just going to add a little point on party autonomy. So when we teach arbitration to our students, we tend to call party autonomy as the bedrock of arbitration, but in fact, it's nothing new. It's basic contract law from Roman times. And most of us have a Roman law background, so we probably remember in first year when we studied Roman law, the contract, the example of the guy who goes to another guy and asks, "Cento mi da risponde," so do you promise to give me 100? And the other guy says, "Spondeo," so I promise, and there you go, you have a contract. So even though we didn't have anything in writing, we didn't have courts, we didn't have the formalities of law today, consent was already, under the Roman covenant, a very morally serious promise. And to this, we can add the compromissum of canon law. Again, the very name of the arbitration clause or compromissory clause comes from canon law. So the enhancement of community peace through the possibility for the parties to choose the judges. And those, that's basically the basis of arbitration. We have something similar in the Quran, we have something similar in the Torah, but basically we go back to the fact that the community can choose their own judge. Or in our case, the business community can choose arbitrators. But just like in canon law and in Islamic law and in the Torah, we also have higher law limits, so things that cannot be derogated by the parties. In religion, we have the concept of justice. We have the concept of non-harming others. We have the fact that certain things, certain aspects are not subject to the waiver of the parties. How do we translate this into modernity or into contemporary law? We just have pacta sunt servanda with boundaries. So the parties can do whatever they want within a certain perimeter, and the perimeter is guarded by fences. I'm going to go back to the concept of fence as a metaphor over and over during my presentation. So when we look at these fences, we look at these boundaries, what do we look at? Obviously, we start from the New York Convention. That's basically applicable in every country that does arbitration. It embeds a universal checkpoint for what can be done and what cannot be done in arbitration. So one may wonder, as José was saying, is there still space for religion in arbitration? And my theory is that even if we don't think there is space for religion, the whole architecture counts for religion. Even the judicial oversight that courts put on arbitration or the states put on arbitration is still a religious inheritance. So party autonomy is not an absolute thing. It's delegated. The state gives the parties certain powers. Pick your dispute, pick your forum, pick your applicable law, pick your arbitrators, but you have constraints. It's just like the Bible gives free will to people, but then you have to deal with God once you die. And we have similar concepts again in Islamic law and in Hebraism. So in this context, I tend to see public policy not just as norms, but as higher norms, so a kind of religious aspect there. As I said, arbitration works to me like a curated devolution. The state empowers the parties and empowers the arbitrators, but then keeps an eye on that. And the eye is just like an attentive parent telling the kids to go play in the backyard. Kids can do whatever they want, but the parent is always going to be with an eye at the window, just making sure they don't kill each other or they don't destroy the neighborhood. So the review is very limited, as we know, and the intensity of the review is calibrated to third-party stakes or systemic stakes. So how much the rest of the business community, how much the rest of the state, or much of the international community cares about what happens in arbitration. Now, there are certain non-derogable cores. Anti-corruption comes first. Basic procedural fairness comes second. Again, we go back to Gaillard. As long as you have fairness, arbitration can take place worldwide. But then we have consent. And what is this consent? Do we have a thick consent or do we have a thin consent? Most of arbitration is based on thin consent. Like when parties sign a contract, they usually love each other. They want to have a marriage together. They're happy and they say, yeah, let's write an arbitration clause. Nothing's going to happen anyways. Let's just put one there. Then something happens. A dispute arises. And out of a sudden, one party still wants to go to arbitration and the other goes over the way just to avoid arbitration. So because of this thin consent, we need a narrow fence because we need to protect the pacta sunt servanda, as we said, but there are boundaries that must be made by external forces, the state, judges, the courts, the New York Convention. you don't just write your own Bible. You take the Bible, you can interpret it in different ways, and as Christians know, the Bible can be interpreted in many different ways. We have so many confessions, I can't even count them. But the one basic point is the Bible is the same for everybody. So what is the metric of legitimacy? Most countries apply the concept of fairness, procedural fairness mostly, without retrying the merits, without getting into the substance. And again, that comes from religion, mostly from canon law, the liberum arbitrium, the free will. Again, do whatever you want, then you're going to have to deal with God. Do whatever you want, then you're going to have an arbitrator looking at your dispute. Arbitrators, do whatever you want, but then there will be a judge checking that the award is actually enforceable. So my research obviously focused on England and Wales as a jurisdiction and Italy as the other one, because cheekily, I'm Italian, I live in England, so that was easy. But mostly because we have a common law example and a civil law example. And what I say about England can be applied for most of the Commonwealth. What I say about Italy can be applied for most of the civil law countries, including Brazil as a Euro Convention country. So England and Wales, well, that's easy. England is a legally minimalist country, which focuses on two things, due process and illegality. Section 103 of the Arbitration Act 1996 was not touched by the recent 2025 reform, and basically takes the refusal grounds in Article 5 of the New York Convention, copies them, gives it a mix like James Bond with this vodka martini, and puts it back there. What do the courts do? They police fundamental fairness, not outcomes. You will very rarely, if ever, meet a British judge who cares about the outcome of the dispute. As long as the procedure was fair, as long as every party had the opportunity to present their case, and evidence was collected properly, and there was no corruption part of the tribunal, London is a surefire port for your award. There's a lot of deference to the arbitral tribunal. Judges tend to consider the arbitrators the real experts, probably wisely. So when do we engage public policy in England? Well, mostly when corruption is hinted but not definitive, or when there is a concept of illegality. Let's say I want to sell my kidney to Evelyn, and then I decide rightly to change my mind, and Evelyn might want to take me out to arbitration because we have an arbitration clause. Well, the arbitrators will probably not hear the claim, but in case somebody does, there will be a judge saying, no way, this is beyond the scope. Occasionally, some consumer law and competition law issues appear, but the judges rarely expand review upon those, unlike what happens in Italy, as I will say in a second. So there is a very strong proceduralist culture. The fence exists, it's very firm, but it's also very thin. Party autonomy is implemented as its maximum. So the outcome of what I saw in English awards is basically you have a high enforceability in the UK and very stable expectations by the parties. So one might think, okay, then I should just go to London. Not so fast. In Italy, we have another concept that I put in Italian because I don't really want to call it international public policy. That's the translation, but I will go probably with the French Ordre Public International, so something actually a little bit stronger than just public policy. And let's not forget the shadow of the European Union. So under Articles 839 and 840 of the Code for Civil Procedure, the enforcement of the award needs to go through international public policy. So the award must be consistent with Italian public policy, which, just so you know, it's not the Vatican's public policy, it's a little bit more open, and international public policy. What is this international public policy? That's a good question. It tends to become Catholic public policy, as we will say. But it's interesting to know that Italian judges tend to be more willing to inspect substantive compliance like corruption. And after the Eco-Swiss case, now the EU competition law tends to be looked up as well as part of international public policy. So the intensity of the review can actually rise depending on systemic interest that the case might bring forward. So due process requirements remain the essential gateways, just like in England and Wales, just like in the rest of the Euro Convention countries. But the culture provides for a thicker fence when some externalities, Ordre Public International, EU shadow, competition law sometimes loom. So the outcome is a tempered autonomy, is a little bit more like the Jewish autonomy, if you want, rather than the Christian one. So what are the convergences and the divergences here? Well, England and Wales on one hand and Italy converge on the taboo of anti-corruption. If an arbitrator is corrupted, the award is going to throw out the window. and a baseline of fairness in procedure. They diverge on the fact that England is very proceduralist, as I said, whilst Italy has some sort of sensitivity for substance as well. And they have obviously different stances as a result of that on the reappraisal on the merits. But there is also a variable thickness of the fence, and this leads me to suggest any sort of arbitrator or other parties signed an arbitration clause to look at the forum and have a strategy for that. And these limitations, they all come from the religious roots of arbitration. So whenever we do this sort of research, we tend to have a normative proposal, at least to show the taxpayers that we're actually doing something concrete with the money. So my proposal in this case will be to keep the review narrow, as in they do in England, but non-porous. So occasionally give the judges the power to at least look at what the case was about. The Bible said so. Widows, orphans, and the strangers. So the fence can be thick when there are third parties, well, there are no third party interests, but when there are, take a look at how their work can actually affect other members of the community. The barrier can otherwise be thin for purely bilateral or technical disputes, the concept of adiaphora, the things indifferent. But one suggestion for parties and arbitrators will be to always document due process integrity in the record. As the Deuteronomy says, every official act must bear 2 or 3 witnesses, so you know what's going on. In arbitration, we don't need the witnesses, but we need a proper record. And I will also suggest parties to draft the clauses with evidence pathways for issues of public policy. That's the ketubah concept, the monastic concept. The promise itself builds on how truth will be shown when things go wrong. So write it down, and you write down how you want the evidence to be presented, and you're going to be fine. The aim of this sort of like mixed version of arbitration will be to have autonomy with justice beyond consent. And we go back to free will, or liberum arbitrum. Parties are free stewards, but like vows before God, their freedom is framed by non-derogable duties of truth and fairness. So what would be the practical takeaways? And this will be my conclusion. Parties and councils choose seats and the seat of enforcement with the profile of the fence in mind. Thick or thin, that depends on what the case is about. Align your evidence strategy to what the review is going to be. If it's in a place that does some substantive review, more documentation. If it's only procedural, well, that's the only thing you need to document. Use soft law, like the IBA guidelines, to signal fairness ex ante. So instead of waiting for a judge to look into the word, let's just follow the guidelines and make sure that the word is immediately applicable. If you have a case in Italy, do map your competition exposure or the corruption exposure early. Obviously, if you're in England, make sure you focus on procedural irregularity and illegality risk. Party autonomy, we go back to square one, only exists because it's given. So if it's given, let's keep it in a way that's actually enforceable and have arbitration properly all over the world. And I think I can leave it at that. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Professor Paulo. And now we can continue, and I will pass the word for Defer Dridi, please. Can you start?
Thank you, Evelyn. So, good afternoon for everybody from Tunisia. Allow me to begin by expressing my deepest gratitude to the organizers of this webinar, CAMS Brazil, for this remarkable initiative and for the honor of being part of such a rich collective reflection under the theme From the Sacra to Lex Mercatoria, Sacrality and Secularism in Arbitration. I feel a special emotion and a profound pride in being here today alongside not only distinguishable colleagues, but also dear friends who I first met more than 20 years ago at the Hague Academy of International Law. This reunion brings to our webinar both intellectual and personal signification. And if you allow me, I would also like to extend a particular and heartfelt thanks to my friend José, whose friendship and trust means so much to me. It's in this spirit that I will address the topic Unidroit principles at the crossroads of Lex Sacra and Lex Mercatoria. My aim will be to show through the example of the principle of good faith organized in the Article 1.7, as said my friend José, of the UNIDROIT principles, how these principles often regards as an expression of the modern lex mercatoria, in fact embody values that resonate across traditions, including Islamic law, and how they therefore stand at the true crossroads of sacrality and commercial pragmatism. To do so, I will structure my remarks in three parts. First, I will explain how the UNIDROIT principles are considered an expression of the lex mercatoria. Second, I will present the principle of good faith under the Article 1.7 and its role in the system of the principle. Finally, I will demonstrate that this principle, far from being foreign to religious or cultural traditions, is firmly established in Islamic law, illustrating a genuine normative convergence. Let's start with the UNIDROIT principles as an expression of the lex mercatoria. The UNIDROIT principles are widely considered one of the most sophisticated manifestations of what we now call the modern lex mercatoria. The preamble of the principle is explicit. It provides they may be applied when the parties have agreed to refer to general principles of law, to the lex mercatoria, or when it's necessary to interpret or supplement international instruments. Historically, the lex mercatoria referred to the law of merchants, a body of transnational rules that governed commercial exchange in medieval Europe, independent from state law. Today, the expression designates a set of principles drawn from practice, arbitration, and soft law instruments, among which the UNIDROIT principles stand out as the most comprehensive. The main features of this modern lex mercatoria are well known. It's universal and neutral, detached from any particular state system. It's flexible and adaptable, designed to respond to the practical needs of international commerce, and it's functional and pragmatic, focusing on efficiency rather than rigid formalism. Thus, the UNIDROIT principles are not merely an academic exercise. They constitute a genuine tool of global private governance relied upon by arbitrators, judges, and even contracting parties. And at the very heart of this codified lex mercatoria lies a cardinal principle, the principle of good faith. The principle of good faith under the Article 1.7 of UNIDROIT principles. Article 1.7 provides that each party must act in accordance with good faith and fair dealing in international trade. It further adds, the parties may not exclude or limit this duty. This provision deserves several important comments. First, its general scope. Good faith applies to every stage of the contract, from negotiation to performance and even the post-contractual fees. The mandatory character. Unlike many other provisions, this one cannot be derogated from the parties. Within a soft law instrument, this is remarkable, and it shows the fundamental importance attached to good faith. Its practical function in the third point. In international arbitration, the principle serves as a corrective tool. It allows tribunal to sanction abusive behavior, to interpret or supplement contractual obligation, and to harmonize divergent legal traditions. Thus, good faith is not just another rule, it's a structural principle of the lex mercatoria. Yet, it's important to stress that this principle is not a purely Western creation, rather, it reflects a value shared across many legal systems, including Islamic law. Good faith in Islamic law. We must recall that the drafting commission of the UNIDROIT principles brought together jurists from diverse backgrounds: civil law, common law, socialist law, customary law, and indeed Islamic law. This diversity ensured that the principles would be seen as truly universal, not as the product of single legal tradition. In Islamic law, good faith is a foundational principle. It appears under several notions. Husn al-niyya, purity of intention, sidq, sincerity, and amana, loyalty and trust. The central idea of that parties must act with honesty, transparency, and fairness in all contractual dealing. The scriptural sources are explicit. The Quran condemns fraud and dishonesty in trade. The Prophet Muhammad is reported to have said, "Whoever deceives us is not one of us." Legally, the principle of good faith permeates Islamic contracts law. In sale contracts, the buyer may rescind the transaction if a hidden defect is discovered, and we call that khiyar al-aib. In partnership contracts such as mudaraba or musharaka, loyalty and honesty are essential to ensure equitable sharing of profits and to prevent abuse of trust. In this way, Islamic law treats good faith not as a necessary obligation, but as a foundational principle. Therefore, when the UNIDROIT principle organize good faith in Article 1.7, they do not create something new. They rather express in universal legal language a norm already firmly established across different legal and cultural traditions. To conclude, the example of good faith demonstrates that the UNIDROIT principles truly stand at the crossroads of the Lex Mercatoria and Lex Sacra. On the side of the Lex Mercatoria, they provide a modern, flexible, and practical instruments widely used in international arbitration. On the side of the Lex Sacra, they embody ethical values that are shared across civilizations, including Islamic law. Article 1.7 on good faith illustrates this double dimension perfectly. It shows that the UNIDROIT principles are not merely codification of commercial practices, they contribute to the universalization of contractual values, reconciliation ethics and economy, sacrality, and commerce. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dridi. And Patricia, we have questions addressed to the speakers. And no, we don't have, but we have some questions to do with each other. Can be, we have like 10 minutes to finish the webinar. So please, Nantala, our nice guy here, Mr. Congenially.
Thank you, Evelyn. You are so kind. But I don't have particular questions, but comments. Dridi Daffer, Professor Daffer just showcased some interesting elements of good faith, even in Sharia and Arab law, which is very important and is very unknown here in Brazil and for many other Occidental practitioners. It's very important. And what is something interesting is that good faith is you can find references to good faith in many other cultures. Even Confucius has a very interesting comment on good faith, more than a comment. In his Analects, he has a teaching on good faith that relates good faith to a yoke bar or a collar bar for mankind. So the particular I found it here is just like this. How can, this is very interesting, how can an ox-drawn wagon be pulled if it has no yoke bar, or a horse-drawn cart be pulled if it has no collar bar? What good is a man if he acts without good faith? So this is very interesting, and this translation seems reliable because it's from a Chinese professor, and this multicultural element that we have in good faith is something really important, and it shows why, at least in my opinion, it is accepted as a principle in many jurisdictions, and how it is important for the whole system. If we have a system, it's another history that we would have to discuss with other teachers as well. But if we have a system, good faith is a very important element of the system. So this is my comment.
Thank you very much, José. Paulo, would you like to say the final words?
Yeah, I could add to these reflections on good faith to actually share a reflection with you. So when I started this part of the research, I had colleagues, as you know, living in England and working in England. Arbitration is a big hub here. And some of the questions were like, okay, that's certainly interesting to study the religious roots of arbitration, but what's the point? Why should we be interested? Why should we reading this? If not just as a hobby, just to have a look. And I think what we saw today is that most of the concepts that inform arbitration, good faith, public policy, party autonomy, they all come from religious roots. And it's interesting because just like any arbitral tribunal will look at different legal traditions to interpret certain concepts, especially if you apply the CSG to the merits of the case, then you start looking at all kinds of jurisdictions. I mean, why not religion? Which doesn't mean that, oh yeah, the Bible said so, so I'm going to apply this interpretation. It's not because of that. If I look at the Bible, if I look at the Quran, if I look at the Torah, if I look at Confucius, I'm looking at the historic roots of this concept. So do I want to know what good faith is? It's not explained. I mean, yes, it's explained in the civil code in Italy, in the civil code in France, in the common law for England and Wales, but it's not just that. It has a root, has a religious root. So I don't need to be religious to appreciate these historical roots. But without the historical roots, I'm basically interpreting things that are shallow. And I see that with students more than counsels. I see that with students and certain arbitrators. I'm not going to make any names, obviously. But there is a certain ignorance. It's like, nothing existed until 1948. And then after 1948, oh, look at that. We have the UN, and we have the CSG, and we have this treaty, and we have that treaty, and we have the New York Convention. Yeah, this concept, there's nothing new in these instruments. It was already there. It's been used for ages, especially good faith. I mean, we still have it in the statute of the ICJ, ex sequent bono. If the party won't even state, if the party want to, they can decide the disputes after good faith. And I think this also solves the problem of public policy. Because, if I go to Italy, if I go to England, if I come to Brazil, if I go to Tunisia, I can look at the constitution and easily understand what public policy is. But if I look at international public policy, what do you look at? Well, what is the one thing that accommodates the whole humanity? Religion. Even for atheists, it's still a part of the culture. Again, Italy is no longer a Catholic country. It's full of atheists. I'm probably one of them. It doesn't matter. It still remains a culturally Catholic country. So if you want to look at good faith in Italy, you might as well look at the gospel and the sacred texts, even before the constitution. I think I can do that for pretty much every country in the world. For international public policy, I mean, Duffer's presentation was evident there. As long as you have an Abrahamic root, religions might have differences in rituals, in the way we worship, in the way we express prayer, but still come from there. So the concepts are still there. So let's start looking at that. William Park does touch upon religion in his writing. He's one of the few, very few. I mean, I'm hoping to open this new route in research. And thank you, José, for organizing this, because it shows that A, there is interest, and B, it actually opens a door for that. So I'm actually excited to see what's going to come out of this.
Thank you very much. And now, Dr. Dridi, for your final words, please. You have to open the mic.
Okay. Hello, thank you, José, for organizing this. Thank you, Paulo. Thank you, Evelyn. And hope that we will meet in a next important subject.
So thank you. We could stay here all afternoon, and would it be enough? So I would like to thank you guys in behalf of CAMIS, and I'm sure that would be the first of many webinars to come, and to thank you, the audience, in this afternoon here in Brazil. Thank you all.
Thank you. Have a good day.
Good day, people. Thanks.